Welcome to Numbers Simplified. In this channel, we seek to simplify and solve numerical problems. Today, we'll be looking at square roots using the product of prime factors. Let's start with the terminology. A square. The square of a number is a product of a number by itself. Example 1. The square of 5 is 5 times 5, which gives us a 25. However, we say that 5 is the square root of 25, denoted by the symbol square root 25 is equal to the square root of 5 squared, which is equal to 5. The other thing, a square root is a number which is a value when multiplied by itself gives the number. Example 2, the square root of 4, that is to say, root 4 is equal to root 2 to the power 2, which is equal to 2. Take note, the square root and the square cancel out. And with that, from the laws of indices, the square root of x squared results in the x. Why? It's because the square root and the square cancel out. Also, x times x is equal to x squared. Subscribe not to miss out, but learn more on the topics, especially of upcoming topics, including the laws of indices. Right. To find the square root of a number using product of its prime factors, we use the following steps. Step 1. Express the number as a product of its prime factors. Step 2. Pair repeated prime factors in different groups. And the final step. Select one of the set or one of the groups. With these 3 steps, we are assured of getting the square root of any number. Let's look at example 3. Find the square root of 36. Now, we start by finding the prime factors of 36. But if you don't remember, make sure you click on that video in the description and find out how we get the product of prime factors. So expressing any number as a product of its prime factors. So with that, we are going to proceed. So the first thing that we do is to find all the prime factors that are related to 36. So the first one, of course, is a 2. We move on to 18. By 2, we get 9. This time around, we divide by 3. We get 3. By 3, we get 1. Then we have those factors, prime factors to be precise. That is to say, 36 can be rewritten as 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And that will be equal to that which we have. Then we group the prime factors into different groups because some of the factors here are repeated. So that we have 2 groups, 2 times 3 being the first group, 2 times 3 in the other group. So now that is to say the square root of 36 is the square root of 2 times 3 squared because we are multiplying 2 similar groups. Now with that, the square root and the squared will cancel out so that we are left with 2 times 3 giving us a 6. That's how we get the square root. Great. So we use the basic example here, but let's move on to example 4. Moving on to example 4, we have find the square root of 225. We follow the same procedure of finding the prime factors. So the smallest prime factor we get here is a 5. We divide that by 5 once again to get 45. We divide 45 by 5, we get 9. This time around, we divide by 3, we get a 3. By 3, we get 1. So we express 225 as a product of its prime factors so that we get that 5 times 5 times 3 times 3. We separate these into 2 identical groups. we would have 3 times 5 in each group. So meaning that the square root of 225 would be 3 times 5 because the square root and the square will cancel out. At the end, we have 15 as our answer. That's how the method works. Now let's dive into a more challenging example. Right, so maybe before we get into a challenging example, let's get back to a simpler example. This time around, we'll do it faster. So we want to find the square root of 64. 64, of course, we would get those factors 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. Right, so all we have are 6 2's. That is to say, 2 to the power 6, if you understand and know the laws of indices. But now, we separate this into 2 identical groups, so we would have 2 times 2 times 2 in each group, meaning that the square root of 64 would be those 2's multiplied by themselves 3 times to get 8 is our square root. Great then. So let's move on to the next example. So with the next example, we are going to find an amazing square root. So the square root of a huge number, 23,716. Of course, we need to find the factors, prime factors. Now here, it's easy to see that 2 is a prime factor because the last digit is an even number. We divide that by 2, we get 11,858 divided by 2 once again, we get 5,929. We divide by 7, we get 847. Divide by 7, we get 121. So if you know your times table, it's easy to see that 11 will be part of the primes here. So we divide that by 11, we get 11, and divided by the final 11, we get a 1. Right, so we can express our number 23,716 expressed as 2 times 2 times 7 times 7 times 11 times 11. Now we separate this into 2 identical groups. Each group would have 2 times 7 times 11. So now the square root of that number would be 2 times 7 times 11. When we multiply that, we would get 154 is our answer. Great. So let's move on to the other example. This time around, we want to find the square root of 20,736. So we find the prime factors. It's easy to see that the first one would be a 2. We divide by 2. We get 10,368 by 2, by 2 again, by 2 again, by 2 again, by 2, by 2, by 2, by 2. Then when we get to 81, we see that we can no longer divide by a 2, but the next smallest prime factor is a 3. We divide 81 by 3, we get 27 by 3, 9 by 3, 3 by 3, we get a 1. Awesome. So now we are saying the square root of 20,736 would be given by this 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 because we have separated this into 2 identical groups. So the square root and the square will cancel out so that when we multiply these digits, we get 144. Awesome. So if you have made it thus far, congratulations. However, I leave you with the following task. Make sure you attempt it using the method we have just introduced. It's a handy method. Without a calculator, it's easy to get the solutions and without necessarily guessing the values to compute. Now, I would like you to share your experience in our sessions, your preferred numerical future topics, your questions, concerns, and suggestions. Hit that subscribe button. And thank you so much for watching Numbers Simplified. God loves you.